Howdy, Tony Ochino, Tony the Tiger. So this is a TVZ, and you are going to demonstrate to everyone, or hopefully yourself, the problems that every person who's ever come to me asking for coaching has demonstrated. So you are in good company. If we watch from the very, very, very beginning, so you're split, right? Grab this, make a worker, grab these guys, put them on one mineral patch. If you have time, grab 3 and put them on the other mineral patch. But usually if you don't have time, it's better to just leave them alone and they'll do their own thing. This is called trusting the AI, and we're going to see it in every single example of your battles as well. As you got to trust the AI, bro. Just let them do what they want to do. So if you do it right, they should all get to their mineral patches and start mining by about 4 seconds. So you're 6 seconds late. That's annoying. It's not the end of the world, but it's annoying. And the way you can tell whether you did it properly is at the second this guy is done, all of these guys should be already returning their minerals, and you should be able to start the next worker. So right there, you missed a couple of seconds on that worker. So throughout the whole game, we're going to see you missing 1 second or 2 seconds on workers, and it's going to add up to be eventually about 12 workers by 10 minutes. And obviously if you have 27% fewer workers with a base that could support all 27% of those additional workers, then your income is going to be significantly low. So right here we're missing a couple seconds of the worker. That's because this depot started a little bit late. And the depot didn't start a little bit late because you couldn't afford to build the depot. It just started a little bit late because you didn't build the depot even though you could have, right? So now is when you can build a depot, but you didn't because you just didn't. So 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7. 7 seconds late is when the depot started. 7 seconds after you had 100 minerals. And we're going to see how long you're delayed by delaying your depot for 7 seconds. It looks like 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7. 7 seconds. What a coincidence. So you missed about 7 seconds in the beginning, 7 seconds there. That adds up to 12 seconds, which is 2/3 of an SCV that you are already behind. Now we're going to get a Rax, baby, Rax. You're going to do the very standard, oh look, missed a depot there. I mean, SCV there, like no reason to. You got 100 minerals, no reason to miss this SCV. Very bad. And you're over here trying to make sure that you can block his hatchery for a little while, and that's fine, and micro tricks like that are nice, but the value of delaying his hatchery for 2 seconds is approximately 1 larva. And the value of 1 larva, very, very little, almost nothing. So it has some value, more than 0, but it does not have enough value for you to want to delay an SCV to do it. And you delayed mining gas to do it, which is going to delay your factory to do it. So you're delaying a lot of stuff just to play with this guy over here. And is it worth it? That is the question. Is it worth it? Obviously the answer is no, but you know, we're going to pretend that it's a question rather than an answer. So now we got this Marine over here, and he's doing a little cha-cha looking for the Overlord to see if he can chase the Overlord around. And throughout the game, basically, at some point, oh, you missed another SCV just now. At some point, you have 64 SCVs and the Zerg, or you have 40 SCVs and the Zerg has 64, and his income is double yours, and there's just no way you can win the game from there. So you made the right units, you used them in a reasonable way, but you just got monstrously outmined by the Zerg. And you didn't get monstrously outmined by the Zerg because he mined so much. You mined very little. He didn't do great, you did badly. And what happens is, whenever you remember to make an SCV, like you just missed about an SCV and a half over there, just because you weren't paying attention, and whenever you notice that you've been missing SCVs and you go back to make more SCVs, you make 1. And this is a build efficiency thing. You're trying to be super efficient with your build, but when you make only 1, you have exactly 17 seconds to look back and make another one. And if you don't look back and make another one on time, this time when your CC is idle is permanently lost income. Permanently lost, bro. Permanently lost. And I noticed in some of your other games that ran long that once you get about 12 minutes into the game, you start triple queuing SCVs like a good person who knows how to play StarCraft. But in the very beginning, you try to be super efficient with your builds and you really mess it up. really inefficiently build stuff. Another question I had was that you do the 4 heli and 1 marauder opening, and then you just kind of leave this tech lab on this racks forever, and that's kind of weird because you're never going to use it again. So why is it still there? Here we go. You just missed a fraction of an SCV again there. So 6 minutes in, we know that ideally the most possible SCVs you can ever have is 24 3/4, like almost 25, and you have 21. So you're already 3.5 SCVs behind, and every SCV this early in the game that you have gets you 40 minerals per minute. So when you missed 1 SCV in the first minute, that it's been 3 minutes since then where that SCV would have gotten you 40 minerals and 40 minerals and 40 minerals and 40 minerals and 40 minerals. That would have been almost 230 minerals that you lost just by delaying that very first SCV. So in the extremely early game, it's more important to not miss SCVs than it is in the later game, because once you cap out on this saturation, like right now, every SCV you make from now on is slightly less useful than the SCVs you made before now, because what are they going to do? Nothing, right? They can't really. They're just going to change one of these patches from having 2 guys on it to having 3, which doesn't really help you very much. And then once you land this second command center, suddenly they go back to being extremely important again. So in a fast expanding build, the entire first 8 minutes, it's extremely essential never to delay any SCVs. And supply blocking is just another way to delay SCVs. So you supply blocked right there because you're waiting for this command center, but that's another build efficiency thing. You've probably seen pro players delay something to try to get the command center and use it as a supply depot and whatever, and that's because they've spent hours and hours timing out their build exactly, and they know that they're not going to delay any SCVs by doing that. But you're delaying a ton of SCVs, and you're not making SCVs right now. Oh my god, this is crazy. This orbital is also being delayed. Every 17 seconds you delay an orbital costs you, I believe, well, okay. If you delay an orbital in order to make SCVs, right, then every 17 seconds you do that costs you, I think, 10 minerals. But if you delay an orbital and don't make SCVs, then every 10 or 20 seconds you're doing that, that's a bajillion minerals that you're losing. That's crazy. So the command, you got to get the priorities right. Your command centers are your most important thing, and if they're not constantly producing SCVs, you're just going to end up with a much smaller army than you wish that you would have had. After that, the next most important thing is to use the buildings you have, and you're going to notice you go straight up to 3 factories, but you're kind of not using the 2 factories that you have all the time. So like right now, this factory is idle for a little while. And it's the same exact problem as the SCV problem, is that you're not queuing up units. You're trying to be too efficient.
Our SCVs are under attack.
So if we just keep all of your buildings selected, all of your buildings should be used all of the time. And you are good enough to make that true, because we see you doing it in the late game. Once you have your 5 factories, once you have your 5 factories and 3 command centers, I see you queuing up to 6 workers and keeping your SCVs constantly produced. And I see you queuing up to 4 Hellions so that your reactored factory constantly produces Hellions, and so on and so forth. The problem is that you've convinced yourself that in the early game it's more important to get your buildings up quickly than it is to keep up on infrastructure, and that's kind of like backwards, man. In the late game, it's okay to miss some cycles because you have so much infrastructure that you can bring down these spending deficits. But in the early game, every SCV you delay, every tank and Hellion you delay is putting you permanently behind. So again, you're throwing down 2 more factories, and so you're going to cut production on one of your factories, or maybe even multiple factories, in order to get up these 2 more factories. Also, you notice your tank count is going to end up being pretty low because you don't have the gas to get more tanks because you spent all this gas on 2 more factories. And this is both a bad thing and a good thing. Okay, the reason that this is good, this style that you have of getting your buildings too early, is that you keep your money really low. So the biggest, most important factor in how much army you get is how much money you get. But the second and equally important biggest factor towards how much army you're going to get is how much of the money that you pulled in you're actually able to spend. And you don't have the second problem because of this penchant that you have for making too many buildings. So you tend to have your this money, this bank tends to be very low, and I'm glad that you keep your money low, and that's great. I like it. I like it. Another thing that we're about to see, I can see the future because I casted these games earlier, but I forgot to, I don't know, I didn't forget anything. My computer's just stupid and it didn't record the audio. It did record the audio, but it was in a weird format or something, I don't know. Anyway, you have no anti-air, and he's going to show up with mutas, and you're going to have a bunch of Hellions and tanks, and you're going to say, oh, I can't really kill mutas with this, now can I? So you're going to start 2 Thors, but you're supply blocked so the second Thor doesn't start building, and you're going to make a Marauder, because Marauders shoot at mutas now. And you're going to throw down 2 turrets, which is cool, but I would have liked to see a turret here and 2 turrets here. And so whenever I watch a replay, the first thing I do is check benchmarks, which we've seen now. I check how many workers you had at 6 minutes. If you don't have 24 workers at 6 minutes, that's going to stack up to be such a huge deficit in cash that you probably should just consider the entire game not worth watching. Just say, I didn't have 24 workers. I am, what is this? 3 divided by 21 is 1/7. You're 1/7 behind. Dude, math. Math, 1/7. You gotta bear with me. I like math so much that sometimes, even though it's irrelevant, I do math. So 1 divided by 7. 14. You're 14% behind on economy. So the best you can possibly do is a 14% smaller army than you would like. And so any build that you work out that you get good at is going to be a build oriented around having 17% less money than you really should have. So is it really worth getting super good at using a bad build? Building this command center in place, not only is it idle for a long time, delaying the orbital and delaying SCVs, but it has to be idle to float down into the proper place. And the whole point of the Marauder Hellion opening is that with 1 Marauder and 4 Hellions, you are so powerful that you can kill anything the Zerg can send at you, especially if you get a bunker on the low ground. And that allows you to build your command center in place so that you don't have to float it all the way from over here. Terran's ability to float command centers is super powerful when you're taking your 3rd and when you're taking your 4th. But when you're taking your natural, man, in TVZ, just take your natural on the low ground in place and defend it with your first 2 Marines and your first 2 Hellions and then your Marauder. In fact, it's not a coincidence that this build asks you to get 2 Marines and a Marauder. That's exactly how much fits into your low ground bunker. Anyway, so first thing I do is check those benchmarks. At 8 minutes, you also want to have 30 workers, although if you go with a faster command center, you can end up with 32 or 34 or something. And you're 5 workers short, so 5 divided by 30 is, you know, stuff, 1/6, so you're still about 15% behind on economy. And then the final one we're going to look at is the 10-minute benchmark. At 10 minutes, you really want to have an army, because especially if you're not getting a 3rd, then you're really, the strength of a 2-basing build, of a late 3rd build, is how strong you are between 10 minutes and 13 minutes when you're stronger because you're 2-basing. So only 30 workers, you wanted to have 44, so you're 14 behind, which is, I don't know, 33% behind, and you notice that your army size is 25 instead of 35. Hey Melissa, how's it going? I am recording a video, but no one can see you, so don't worry. So yeah, 25 instead of 35 means you're something percent short on army too. So obviously if you have less money, you're going to have a smaller army. No big shocker there. So the second thing you look at after you look at the benchmarks that you totally missed on is the first time you lost a bunch of money, or the first time you fought a battle. Usually the first time you fight a battle is your army attacking his base, but in this case it's your army fighting his mutas. So we're gonna see the money stack up here for him. He's gonna pull pretty far ahead on damage done. You do kind of chase him away with Thors, but then he just comes around over here and your Thor's out of position now, and he gets to kill a whole bunch of Hellions and kill an add-on and other stuff. He's actually kind of bad with this Muta Harass, and he's got 3,000 minerals in the bank, so he's bad with his macro, he's bad with his Muta Harass. But again, you want to practice as if you're going to be playing against the best people in the universe, because if you learn good fundamentals now, you'll get to use them later on. So he pulls $900 ahead with this Muta Harass, and this is the first battle. So whenever you're looking at a game, first benchmark, second the first battle. Did the first battle go in my favor or not? If it didn't go in my favor, why not? Was my army too small? Did I have the wrong composition? Was my positioning bad? So your army was too small, but that's pretty much irrelevant because only your anti-air counts, and you just got caught without turrets, and that's the end kind of that conversation. So really, if you were watching this game, again, after the 6-minute mark, this game is already kind of invalid and not a very good learning tool because you didn't have any workers. And now after the 12-minute mark, when he hit you with mutas and you had no muta defense, you can just say, look, I forgot to get muta defense. I should always have turrets in my mineral line at 10 minutes. I won't make that mistake again. Let's just move on to the next game. This game isn't really worth considering too much more beyond the point that I should get anti-air. And then the next thing you want to look at is the first real battle. In this case, I wouldn't normally even look at the first real battle because you're $900 behind now, and you don't have to be because of that. What happened to those mutas? So the first thing you want to check about the first battle, first off, did you win it? If you won it, then maybe you don't need to check very much more after that, because whatever you did, whether it was wrong or whether it was right, it was good enough to win the game. So that's cool. But if you lost it, like you're going to lose this battle, the question becomes, okay, why did I lose it? Was my army too small? So first, we're at 16 minutes. The army size benchmark at 16 minutes is going to be... Actually, the problem is that usually you max out before 16 minutes, so the benchmarks don't go that far. But if you maxed out at 13 or 14 minutes, you would be maxing out on about $10,000. So you should have at least $10,000, but probably more at 16 minutes. And the Zerg will usually have 16,000, and he only has 8,000. The Terran will usually have anywhere from like 12 to 15,000, and that it depends on how quickly you expand, really, because on one base you might have less. But definitely you had too small of an army, and you had too small of an army first of all because you had a whole bunch of minerals you couldn't spend. You didn't have enough gas. With this composition, tank, Thor, Hellion, you just don't really want as many Hellions as you would have to build to spend all of this minerals. So you're kind of intentionally stacking up these minerals. Not spending these minerals isn't a mistake on your part. You did that on purpose. You really wanted to have 4 geysers and you don't. The mutas knocked down your geysers, reduced your gas income, and you didn't want to just dump all that money into Hellions, so you decided to just let it sit in your bank. And that's kind of the right move, but unfortunately it's going to cost you about $1,400 of army. I would definitely have liked to see these gas geysers go down immediately after they got killed, because this is such a gas-centric build. Anyway, the second thing that comes into play is you lost this fight. You took a lot of damage from the mutas, but you didn't really lose to the mutas. You lost to the Lings. And Lings just destroy tank Thor. And that's why you made so many Hellions. But the very first thing that happened in this engagement is that your Thor, your Hellions were out front. They're these cute little Hellion guys. And this is not enough Hellions. I would like to see, especially when you have 1,000 minerals in the bank. I'm all for reducing your Hellion count and not getting too many Hellions, but definitely you want to have, like, I don't know, 16, 20, something like that. Not 10. You had 10 Hellions, that's not enough Hellions. But most importantly, your Hellions were in front, the Banelings hit your Hellions, all your Hellions died, and he basically traded like a couple of Banelings for all of your Hellions. And now without Hellions, your force can't kill his force. There's nothing you can do against these reinforcing Lings. And one of the big reasons that those Hellions just straight up died to those Banelings is, what you're choosing to micro. In this battle, you have tanks and Thors, which have extremely slow shots once the tanks are sieged up, and lots of health, and they really basically take care of themselves. Marauders also shoot slow, don't do a ton of damage, take care of themselves. Hellions, very fast, very maneuverable, tons of damage, especially if they splash properly, but very low health. So your goal in this engagement is to only micro your Hellions. They should be on their own special happy control group, or you should just not control group them at all. One of those two things. When you move into position, it's okay for them to be out front, but before you get attacked, you want them to be auto-followed on a Thor unless you're specifically microing them, because you never want your Hellions to be the first thing to take damage from Banelings. That's not good. And then once your army gets right here, siege up this tank, take these guys, right-click, shift, siege up, so that they're going to go siege up over here, and then right-click your Thors over here so that they're just going to walk into position and then stand still and start shooting. Then grab your Hellions and just kite with your Hellions. Your only priority during a mech versus Zerg battle is to not lose your Hellions. You can't do anything that will improve the damage of your Thors. You can't do anything that will make your siege tanks better other than focus firing Banelings. You didn't get siege mode, by the way, and I believe that you didn't get blue flame. That's crazy. But you're very gas starved, so I'm not super surprised, and that's because of losing these geysers. So we're going to see you do something that you do in all of the games you sent me, and this is called hurting yourself with micro. So you're going to stutter step Hellions, Thors, and Tanks. Hellions, Thors, and Tanks don't stutter step. They shoot so slowly that every time you try to stutter step them, you're basically just reducing their damage for no benefit. So you're like, I gotta move a little bit closer and shoot, but notice this Thor didn't shoot. You stop and stand still, but he doesn't shoot. You stop and stand still, but he doesn't get a shot off. Now that you finally stop touching them, he's gonna start shooting, but then you're gonna move him forward again. And so just generally, this fight isn't a great example of it because it wasn't completely terrible to stutter step in there. But in general, all the fights I watched you do, you spent so much time looking at your army and trying to stutter step it into the right position that almost universally it hurt you more than it helped. I want you, until you're promoted to platinum, never stutter step and never micro anything ever again. Just A-move everything, pick one unit, usually it's the Marines, and then move them to a safe spot, move them to the right position. But or in this case it would have been the Hellions, stuff like that. So really stop trying to be clever with your micro, because in every case I've seen in the 4 replays you sent me, your micro hurt you more than it helped you. The idea of stutter stepping is an important idea to master, but until you have it mastered, it just hurts you more than it helps you by a lot. So at this point, if we had stopped the replay and looked, it would have been an army size problem rather than a positioning or a micro or a composition problem. And this just all kind of comes down to the fact that he had 65 workers when you had 30, and you just never really economically were never really competing in the same ballpark as he was. You know, like before the mutas even hit, you're already doomed economically just because you've cut so many workers at this point. So if you don't have at least 44 workers at 10 minutes in TVZ, you lose. If you don't have at least 24 workers in every single matchup at 6 minutes, you lose. And if you don't have anti-air in TVZ by like 11 minutes, I usually shoot for 10, but if you want to push it to 11, that's okay. Then you can lose. And if your army size at 14 minutes is less than 7,000, you lose. So those are the prerequisites. Meet those benchmarks, or if you can't meet those benchmarks, then you're not doing what you need to do to win. So no matter what happens in the game, I don't really want to see it. And I can watch a couple more because these weren't the best examples of where you stand. But in general, those are the rules I have later on for all of my coaching clients. Just generally, you want to be winning macro games, you want to be getting an economic lead, and you want to be constantly producing workers and making a really big army. And if you don't constantly produce army workers, you can't make a big army. So what's the point in the rest of the game if you don't make enough workers, you know? So you'll notice later in the late game, hopefully you'll do it here. I'm watching this command center, which is idle for a long time. Nope. This game was not an example, so we'll go on and watch one of the other games. But in the other games, for a long time you kept your macro up a lot, and we will see that, Daniel Saul. So you sent me 3 TVT games in a row where you did 2 racks all in, and I call it an all in because you pulled 5 workers with it, right? And you didn't build your factory until like 9 minutes with it. So you're basically unable to compete if that push doesn't really crush face. And in all 3 of the games, you had so much bigger of an army than your opponent that you either won or got close to winning with the 2-racks push, and that's cool. If you can win with a 2-racks poke, do a 2-racks poke, and that's great. But I just don't know what kind of advice is reasonable to give. I'm not seeing the late game. I'm not seeing what your follow-up was because you just kind of won with a 2-racks poke. What I can do is give you advice on how to do the 2-racks poke properly, and that is obviously to take the 14 geyser and reactor first and then tech lab and really make sure that you're getting the Marines constantly being produced. If either of these buildings is ever idle and you're betting the entire game on the fact that you're going to have a bigger army than him at 6 minutes, then that's just the wrong way to do it. So in some of these games you did it perfectly, and in other games you didn't do it perfectly. So I got to assume you know how to do it perfectly, obviously, or else you never would have done it perfectly. So just generally, you know, make sure you do it right. Because any all-in, it's all about how well you execute the build up until the point of your attack, right? Because, like, imagine if you did a 2 racks all-in, but you hit him with, like, 2 Marines at 10 minutes. That, you know, doesn't matter that you made 2 racks and that you pulled SCVs. What matters is that you made the biggest army you possibly can. So this is a thing that I saw in every one of your games. Right when this Concussive Shells finishes, you have to spend 25 on the next Marauder. So you have 125 gas, and that's exactly enough to start combat shields. And that's what you're supposed to do. That's how the 2 racks works. So I would say as soon as Concussive Shells finishes, queue up combat shields. And these idle buildings are a big problem. That in all 3 of the games, you either had an idle command center or idle buildings during some of the time. And that's really bad because this is an all-in, man. You're really counting on the strength of these buildings, and you're not using them properly. So, you know, I don't know. Despite how powerful you've shown this build to be, it would be a lot more powerful if you were actually producing enough units. So I would say at 6 minutes and 30 seconds, if you've done everything absolutely right, you should be able to take your second gas and throw it on a factory without cutting any army production. So if you want to do the 2 racks properly, there are 2 transitions. The 7-minute command center, you can see right now, is when you can afford the command center. But if you're going to do the 7-minute command center, you might want to pull dudes off of gas because you just have nothing you can spend gas on. You would have gotten combat shields and then gotten stim, and then you'd be fine. Yeah, I wouldn't recommend pulling dudes off of gas. Keep 3 guys on gas, and just get combat shields and then get stim and get the command center at 7 minutes. If you want to do the 1 base tech follow up instead of the 7-minute command center follow up, then at 6 minutes and 30 seconds with constant production off of these 2 buildings, you have enough for a factory. So throw it down, and then as soon as the factory finishes, throw down the starport, make a Hellion, then get the tech lab, and then start producing tanks, and then start producing tank medevac. And that's the 2 racks follow up for TVT. We see that you killed him, but that's not super surprising. 2 racks is so uncommon because it's so bad that people won't be expecting it, and it will kill them. I actually really laughed at this game the first time we saw it because he scanned, saw your giant army, saw 2 racks, and didn't make a bunker, even though he wasn't planning on making any army. So that's really silly of him. He deserves to lose that one, huh? Another thing you might consider is proxying your 2 racks. Because a lot of the new maps are very big and they take like a full minute to walk across, and you don't wanna take your 6-minute army and attack him at 7 minutes. Like it's much nicer to attack him right when the army finishes building. Which one was that? This was Woohoo. Woo. This is the next 2 racks build, and again, these aren't super helpful because they are only 7 minutes long, and there's nothing really. I mean, you do a lot wrong in these games, but maybe you're doing them wrong on purpose because when you first engage him, if you can tell that you're going to win the game from there, it's totally justifiable to cut macro back home and just go eat a snack or something. Right there, you cut a worker for a very long time just to type same to you. I would always recommend queuing up your second worker before you type anything, because that second worker, you get enough money to build it the second that you can build it, and if you try to do anything in the meantime, it's going to screw it up. So 2 workers before you talk, bro. We're going to see you cut a few workers this time, I think. Just there we saw you miss part of a worker. And right now your depot's late, so this is cutting half of a worker. Here comes the racks, and this is the 13 gas is a big problem because what you want is exactly 50 minerals when your first Marine finishes. So right now you need 50 minerals, and you have an extra 30 minerals, or 30 gas. Sorry, you want exactly 50 gas, and every gas you get is a mineral you didn't get. So if you see right now, your first racks is done. You want to be building your orbital, but you don't have 150 minerals. You want to be getting your reactor core, but you have 30 extra gas. So if you took these 30 gas and turned them into minerals, then you would have exactly enough for the orbital and exactly enough for the reactor core. We're going to see that those 30 gas that you saved up by getting the early geyser are never going to be spent throughout the whole game, and that's why it's important not to get your geyser too early. So you are throwing down the reactor core, but you skipped your orbital because you didn't have enough minerals to get it because you got too much gas. And right now, again, you want your orbital, but you built an SCV instead and you built the supply depot instead. You don't need this supply depot because the reactor's building, you're about to make a tech lab, and you're about to make an orbital. So there's no way for you to make any additional units, so you don't need a supply depot until you've started the orbital. So I don't know if you were eating a snack and just messed this up by accident, but the 19 orbital is definitely a huge problem. A 19 orbital costs you, I believe, 60 minerals. I think over a 16 orbital, because you make 3 additional workers and each one of them costs you 20 minerals. So I definitely recommend getting the orbital on time and getting the reactor on time and this tech lab on time. Now look, you have the tech lab and both of this stuff. You need 25 gas for the Marauder and 50 gas for the concussive shells. So that's 75, and you have an additional 50 gas. So before you had 30 too much gas, now you have 50 too much gas. You've gained an extra 20 too much gas. So the excessive gas is costing you minerals, and the lack of minerals is delaying your orbital and making you cut SCVs for silly reasons and stuff like that. So right now you can't make these 2 Marines because you don't have 100 minerals, but you have tons of extra gas. So this is it's just a build cleanliness thing. By taking that 14 gas, you give yourself enough minerals to use your racks as soon as it's finished, and just enough minerals in general to not miss this SCV. So you're missing an SCV in order to decide whether or not you want to make a supply depot, and you're moving them around back and forth, and look how long you cut that SCV for. So just general build cleanliness stuff. If you're gonna open 2 racks and you're gonna try to win the game off of exactly 2 racks, do it absolutely perfectly every time, because you got nothing else to do. You're just staring at your base. So stare at your base and make sure that you're doing the right things in the right order. So at 6 minutes, if you do the 2 racks absolutely perfectly, you should have $1,000, which is $900 of army. And which means 2 more Marines and 1 more Marauder than what you actually had, and concussive shells done. So you're short 2 Marines and 1 Marauder. That's the cost of the build inefficiencies. You're also short 2 SCVs. So 2 Marines, 2 SCVs, and 1 Marauder is what you're short. Short. The follow-up, again, we're going to see you walk over there and kill him and get distracted by these Reapers and not go back to mining because you feel like you can win with what you've got in his base, and that's fine. So even though not putting these guys back on mining is a huge deal, if you've already won the game, I don't really care. And the final TVT is going to actually be a long, reasonable one, so I'll start a new video for that one.